Welcome to episode 59 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So, we're continuing with our Would You Rather this week. Today's Would You Rather is, would you rather read a book where the main character is killed or read a book with the love interest being killed?
Yes, this is a hard one.
It is, but it's not for me.
Yeah. So my main thought is like most of the books I read, the main characters are like a strong female character.
Yes.
And then the love interest is usually a man in a lot of the books that I read, but obviously I do read some that are not. But in general, a lot of the books I read, it is the strong female main character and the hot male muscle.
Yeah.
That is the love interest. And in that case, I'd kill off the love interest.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Only because, like, sure, for me, I never want to read where either of them die. I want my happily ever after, please and thank you.
Yeah.
However, if I have to have one, I'm gonna pick the love interest dying because at least there's a possibility of the main character finding someone new.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's fair.
It's like, yeah, sure, they may love them now, but they can love someone else later.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe that's a new book, and maybe that's, like, another time, and maybe that was the point all along.
Yeah. And I do find it very jarring, and there's only a few books that I can think of where the main character does die, but it is very jarring to go from, like, being in somebody's head to then be like, and now they're dead. That's the end of that.
Yeah.
Gone forever. And you're like, wait, what? What just happened? Yeah, so it's just a main reason why I feel like I prefer when the love interest is killed off. I do not want a happily ever after. I want to... No, obviously not.
I find it really funny because you were like, this is going to be so hard, but you're like, actually, here's my decision. I don't want it any other way.
Yeah. But then, like, if you think about specific books, then that's when it gets hard. Because I'm like, yes. I love that love interest so much. But I also love the main character so much.
Yeah. I know.
But, like, your favorite book, I'd kill off the main character.
Yep. Do you know what, though? A lot of people would not. I'm actually quite surprised. So, obviously, we're talking about ACOTAR, and not, like, a lot of people dislike Farah.
Yeah.
I think you could be included in that sphere of not loving her. I mean, like, I really appreciate her. Obviously, like, I think after her main story and going into A Court of Frost and Starlight and then into Silver Flame, I think because we're not inside her head anymore, I think she is sort of people are rubbed the wrong way.
Yeah.
But it's, again, you're not hearing her voice, you're not hearing her. I just feel like you didn't hear her motivations, you couldn't hear her like her point of view. So I feel like a lot of that is why she sort of turned from like this character that people liked into someone maybe they don't like as much.
Yeah. I didn't like her in the first book.
No.
And I grew to like her after.
Yeah. I
liked her a lot more after she had some trauma. Not that she didn't have trauma in the first book, because she did, but it was different.
I found Do you know what? I found her frustrating in the first book, especially after rereading it several times. Like, I 100% found her frustrating in the first book, but I think we were supposed to find her frustrating in the first book.
Yeah, that's fair. But I found it so frustrating that I was like, I'm going to lay this down forever. And then, like, you had to force me to continue. Yeah. Which is fine, because, like, eventually I did, and I loved it. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. If you get a book like that, make me push through. Yeah. I'm here for it. But,
yeah. But, yeah, like, if we're thinking of books that have had this ending, I'm sorry, but Divergent, Tris dies and leaves Tobias alive, and I'm still not over it. Like, I'm still mad about it, and I'm pretty sure I haven't read that book in, like, 10, 15 years.
I think we need a spoiler warning. You can't just say that. That's a whole book. That's a whole book. I liked the ending of that book, which I know is counter to what I've been saying. But in that pairing, if I had to pick one of them to die, I'd pick Tris to die.
Yes, I would too, actually, now that we're talking about... Yeah.
Now that you have to pick one, you'd pick her.
I would pick her to die, but I don't want either of them to die. I want them to have their happily ever after.
Well, you can't have everything.
I know. Story of my life.
So no happily ever after. Someone has to die.
Aww. Anyway,
sad.
I do, back to the topic, like, I definitely feel like I would rather the love interest die, but it is definitely couple specific.
Yes.
Because, like, would I choose Reese to die? No. Would I choose I don't want to say, because I feel like I'm spoiled enough as it is.
Would you choose Selena to die, or her partner to be named?
Yes. I could not. I could not decide.
I know. That's where I am.
So
I'd probably choose the love interest in that one, though. Just like I love the love interest in that book so much. But I love Selena more. I'd marry her, so it's fine. That's true. I'd get the best of both worlds.
Good point. You're not wrong. Anyway, so I guess the general consensus is both of us would kill off the love interest and leave the main character as they are.
Yeah.
So just a heads up, if you haven't already guessed, we're not a spoiler-free zone. I'm
not for the Divergent series.
I'm really sorry if anybody wants to read that series. I feel like there's a statute of limitations. Like, that series is like 20 years old. I feel like I'm allowed.
And there's movies and there's books. Like, if you've not gotten a spoiler by now, like, that's impressive.
We're allowed to freely say that Elizabeth and Darcy end up together.
What? Sorry.
So, anyway. Yeah. But if you haven't already guessed, we're not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is our second week doing From Blood and Ash, and we're doing chapters 10 to 21. And last week, we met everybody in the book.
Everybody that will ever be in the entire book.
In the entire series of this book, we met everybody. Nobody else is coming. This is everybody. No, obviously that is wrong. But we met the main ones. So Poppy is the maiden. She's chosen. Hawke is a sexy guard. Victor is her, like, father figure. Who's also a guard, and Tawny is her friend / maid. There's a lot going on with that relationship. Mm-hmm. And a lot happened in our first week. As with many books, a lot happens. But Poppy went to the Red Pearl and made out with Hawke. A lord harassed her while she was on her way to walk in the garden. A woman died of blood loss from, like, a stereotypical vampire bite with 2 teeth, which is weird because, like, the Craven, who are, like, I guess the vampires of this book, have 4 teeth. So when they bite, it leaves 4 teeth marks. And then Poppy and Victor put a Craven out of his misery in secret, or accursed, I guess, which is someone who's becoming a Craven. And Poppy's guard, not Victor, but another one, Rylan, who we decided last week might have been in love with her.
Maybe.
Which is a hot take that I didn't even think of, but very smart. Died. I don't know if I said that yet. He was murdered.
I wonder if there's any, like, if there's anybody that shipped him. Like, he was literally in the book for, like, a hot second.
I know, but that could have been what I want to ask what
he
was meant by that.
To say.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any, like, interviews with JLA where she says anything. It would be good to know, because I never thought of that. It just...
You're welcome.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it a little bit since, because I've been like, interesting. Anyway, so yeah, he was murdered in the garden. And then at the end of last week, a family asked that their child be spared from the rite, but the Duke and Duchess say no.
Because they're jackasses.
100%. So, at the start of chapter 10, it's the day after the audience that the Duke and Duchess had with the people. And Poppy didn't sleep well because of a lot of things, I guess. Obviously, her guard dying, and the family that had asked their child not to be a part of the rite, and, like, just a whole bunch of shit is happening. And she kind of thinks that, like, she could tell that there were other people around that were upset that the Duke and Duchess didn't say yes to this family, which is fair. She thinks about the blonde guy whose emotion she felt, and she thinks it, like... He was
just, like, a witness in the crowd, right?
Yeah, he was nobody.
Okay.
Like, yeah. He does come up later, but, like, barely. But... he was just in the crowd, and she was trying to block off her emotions, and then she felt something weird from him. And she was like, this doesn't feel like normal. Normally pain feels like this or this. But it kind of felt like anger and resentment. And she's like, but that can't be the case, because all I feel is pain. So he must have been feeling pain. So she's kind of talking herself down from it and being like, I must have just been tired. She's like,
ugh. Poppy.
Sure.
Poppy.
Yeah. Poppy also knows that people other than the dissenters are mad at the Duke and Duchess because they have to give up their children. And she kind of thinks, like, shouldn't the gods have enough children by now? And she wonders why, like, it can't be on a case-by-case basis. Which I do understand what she's saying. And I think in the book she says, like the children that are less well off could be given to the gods. And I'm like, you can't... I feel like she is simplifying things too much. Yeah. Like, you can't just say, just because someone's not wealthy, they shouldn't be able to keep their children, whereas wealthy people should keep their children. Obviously.
Is her suggestion that, like, oh, if they can't afford to care for the kid, give it to the gods?
That, I think that was something that she thought. Obviously, all of this is also in her head.
Yes.
And she's very naive, and she's not, like, she hasn't had sex, she hasn't had kids. Like, she doesn't really know what she's talking about. Yeah. But she's trying to find solutions. And, like, case-by-case basis, for sure, is a good idea. Yeah. But, like, also, why do the gods need the kids? Like, there's just... So many things.
From reading ahead, so they give us a little bit more information, like, according to everybody, the third and fourth children are given to the gods, and what that essentially means is they're given to the temples and raised by priests and priestesses to serve as, like, I don't know what you call those people that, like, serve in shrines, essentially. So, like, according to the rulers and everybody here, those children just grow up in temples and serve the gods as, like, acolytes.
I guess it's like, yeah, exactly.
So, like, I would agree with her and, like, say, well, geez, after how many hundreds of years of giving, like, third and fourth kids, like, not just the third and the fourth, like, you could, per family could be, like, think of how many hundreds of thousands of, like, kids that would be. Like, you would think that the temples would be overflowing with people at this point. But they aren't. Why is that?
Wild.
We don't know.
We don't. We do, but we don't.
We do, but we don't, yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of what Poppy's saying. And I 100% understand what she's saying.
Yeah.
It's just, it does feel kind of... She has so much faith.
Yeah.
Even though she doesn't really have a lot of faith. She's kind of like very... She doesn't have faith in... It's kind of like she has faith in the gods, but she doesn't have faith in the church.
Yeah.
Is how I see her relationship with it all. Because, like, obviously she doesn't believe in the Duke because he's been an asshole to her, but she does, like, believe in the gods because that's what she's been taught. But anyway, that's another thing.
Yeah.
But she also thinks that, like, she probably has the power to make a change once she is ascended because she's the queen's favorite. Like, she can talk to the queen when she goes back to the capital, and when she's ascended, maybe she'll be able to advocate for the children and try to find a better system. And even if, like, this is just the beginning of her ideas, it can develop over time and maybe she can figure it out. So I do think that is a good character trait of hers and, like, smart of her that she wants to help.
I feel like I would love for her to, like, this, I love that she's thinking about it, and I think you're right, like, she's just so naive about the system and has so much trust in the system that she's, like, you know, she's a bit stupid about it, like, she's so naive about it, but I do like that this moment has sort of made her question it, so she's starting to think about it. And, like, this is, like, sort of the start of her sort of starting to be like, maybe this system isn't perfect. Like, maybe it isn't right.
Yes. And, of course, she's only gonna, like, realize so much at a time. Yeah. She can't do everything.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Victor then shows up to tell her that the Duke and Duchess have summoned her, and they all go to their office, and the Duke, the Duchess, Commander Jansen, and Hawke are all in the office. So Poppy immediately thinks that Hawke found out it was her at the Red Pearl and then told the Duke, because, like, obviously that would be her first thought. She thinks she's in trouble. But to the reader, it's, of course, because Hawke is going to be her new guard.
Right.
And that's what we find out. And it's kind of funny because the commander says that his reasons for picking Hawke over any of the other guards are, like, exactly the same as what Victor said last week, which was, like, he's very skilled with his weapons, and he's new to Macedonia, so he won't, like, overlook things that guards that are familiar with the place will overlook. And also, he's been outside of the Rise, so he can help if she needs to travel on, like, a very short notice. Especially, like, if the queen does summon her, obviously the queen's not going to want to wait 2 months for her to show up. So, like, they would need to go immediately. So it's good to have somebody that is familiar with traveling outside the Rise. So Hawke is a good asset.
Right.
Then the Duke and Duchess are like, Hawke needs to see her without her veil so that, like, if they're ever in a situation where he needs to protect her, he's not caught off guard by seeing her face. And Poppy's hesitant, obviously. I think part of the reason is because she's like, shit, we made out. And the other part is because of her scars. And, like, the Duke is such an asshole about them that she's very self-conscious. And she can tell that the Duke knows that she's self-conscious about it. So when she takes off her veil, she, like, looks at him and smirks, kind of in defiance.
Yeah.
And probably not the smartest thing to do, but she's a teenager.
Yeah, I just, like, he also, like, I don't know, man. I just have no words. The Duke is an asshole.
100%.
But, like, just the way that he goes about it, because I think you said, like, he smirks at her because he knows she's self-conscious about her scars, but half the reason she's self-conscious about her scars is because he keeps calling her ugly all the time. Like, literally constantly tells her she's, like, ugly, or she's a tragedy because she would have been so pretty except for those scars. Like,
And they don't even sound that bad.
They don't.
Like, and I know if I had scars on my face, I would 100% be self-conscious about them. I do know that. But, like, it's not like, I don't know. It's not like all I can think of is Two-Face and Batman. Yeah. Like, it's not literally like one side of her face is, like, perfect and the other side is completely scarred. It's just two lines that end before her mouth. But she shows her whole face to Hawke, and he doesn't like balk away from it. Like, he doesn't look at her with pity like she expects, and that she appreciates that. And the Duke then, of course, says half of her face is a masterpiece and the other half is a nightmare, which is such a fucking strong word, like a nightmare, really.
But also, why would you say that in front of, like, a new guard?
There's no reason. Other than because the Duke is looking at her and he knows that this guy is hot as fuck. So he wants to, like,
tear her down.
And he knows that obviously Hawke is going to agree with him because
he's the Duke.
The Duke is the highest power in this castle. So, like, if you want to go anywhere, you got to please the Duke. So, but of course, Hawke responds that both halves are as beautiful as the whole. So he basically calls her beautiful, which is sweet.
And calling out the Duke for his bullshit.
Yes, which I appreciate. But it's also, like, it's kind of brave of him because the Duke could make his life a living hell. Yeah. So Hawke says his vow then to protect her, and, like, every guard that takes this vow says the same thing. But he, instead of, like, calling her the maiden during his vow, actually says her name, Penelope, instead of saying the maiden. And she is touched by that because she's like, nobody has ever said, like, not even Victor said her actual name. They've just called her the maiden when they swore themselves to her. Right.
So really, they're swearing themselves to the title, not to her as a person.
Exactly. And he's making it about her as the person, and, like, that really touches her, which you can understand because, like, it's a hard life, I guess. Yeah. Poppy and Tawny talk about it after, and Tawny is just, like, super excited because Hawke is very hot, and she's, like, excited to have him around, and she doesn't really know why Poppy isn't more excited. Yeah. And she's like, you must be hiding something because there's no other reason that you wouldn't be excited to have a hot guard around all the time.
And she is.
Exactly. And Poppy finally tells her about the kiss at the Red Pearl, and Tawny wants all the details. And she says she wishes Poppy had stayed. She probably wouldn't be a maiden any longer if she did. Which I just found funny. I love all those stupid jokes about being a maiden and not being a maiden anymore when you're
I also love that Tawny doesn't sort of, like, balk at it either, right? Like, Tawny's like, oh my god, you should have lost your V card. Like, I know. It wasn't the impropriety of you being kissed, you are not allowed. You know what I mean? Like, which, in fairness, Victor sort of does. Like, Victor is her father figure, but he does sort of balk when she does things that she shouldn't do. He's like, ooh, but you're kind of the maiden, so you kind of shouldn't. Yeah. And she has to sort of convince him that she's allowed to do it or that she should do it. Yeah. So I'm really happy that Tawny is like, nah!
Yeah, and it does really feel like they are friends. And I know, like, I've kind of said it, I think I said it last week, but it actually feels like their friendship is more real than Poppy thinks it is. And, you know, you can't blame Poppy for it. Like, obviously she feels like it's a bought friend. She's not allowed to have friends. She's not allowed to have acquaintances. So you get it. But it's still, like, it does make me feel like their friendship is real. Because that's what you do with your friend. Yeah. Poppy then does tell Tawny that she's worried Hawke will recognize her and tell on her. But they also kind of say, like, if he hasn't recognized her already, then he's likely not a very good guard because, like, you should be able to recognize someone from, like, the bottom half of their face and, like, yeah. So it's a good point.
Great point. Yeah.
And like from kissing them and feeling them up. So, you know.
Yeah.
The next day, Poppy and Tani are in the atrium, and two ladies in wait, Lauren and Defina, show up. And Poppy knows that she should leave since, like, she's not allowed to linger. She's not allowed to socialize. But the two ladies are there because they think that Hawke is hot. So they're literally just there just trying to get his attention. And Poppy wants to watch it play out. So, like, they kind of go back and forth doing different things to get his attention. Like, one of them drops a bunch of crystals, and then one pretends to faint, and one has a headache. And Poppy uses her gift, and, like, all of it is fake. Like, nobody had a headache. Nobody actually fainted. But ever the gentleman, Hawke does help with, like, each of the issues that comes up, because he's, like, such a good guy. But the ladies also talk about Miss Willow Collins, who apparently lived 200 years ago and kept a diary about her very active love life. And the book is, well, the diary is in the Athenaeum. So, like, Poppy could technically go get it at some point. I wonder if she will.
Yeah.
The rite is also a week away at this point, and it's the first time that Poppy is going to be allowed to go to one. And I think we might have said that last week.
Yeah.
But she's going, and she's wearing red, because I think that's what everybody wears. But normally she always wears white. And she also doesn't need to wear a mask, so people probably won't recognize her, because she always wears masks.
I thought she had to wear a mask, but no veil.
Yes, that does say she's wearing a mask, and I just said the wrong thing. Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's gonna wear a mask, no veil. Yeah. But people won't recognize her because
they always see the veil.
Yeah, and she's always wearing white and a veil, and like she always looks the same. So
yeah,
I think last week we said they're letting her go to kind of be like, it's your last one, you can see it. Yeah, I guess. I don't really understand it, but then they all start, all other than Poppy, because she doesn't actually talk to them. She's just sitting there listening.
She's not allowed to talk to them.
Exactly. The ladies start talking about Prince Castile, who is the Dark One, who we brought up last week. He is an Atlantean, and he's like, I guess, the Prince of the Atlanteans is what you'd call him. But the ladies say that he's been spotted nearby, but nobody actually knows what he looks like. And there's like rumors about what he looks like, but nobody can be sure. So Poppy's like, how do they know he was spotted nearby?
Good point.
And then Lauren is excited by the idea of the Dark One being there, which is just an interesting thing to say. And Poppy gets pissed and actually says something out loud. She asks Lauren if, like, rebellion, meaning that, like, people are going to die, sounds exciting. And Lauren actually apologizes for saying that she was excited by the idea of him being around. And Poppy reaches out with her gift, and she feels excitement and fear off of Lauren. Which doesn't make sense, because as we've said before, she can only feel pain. So what is happening? The ladies then leave, and Poppy reaches out to Tani to see if she can feel anything different with her, because she's like, this is two situations now where she's felt emotions that weren't pain from different people. But when she reaches out to Tani, she just feels like a tiny bit of pain over... Like, last week, she lost somebody she knew. I don't know if they were, like, close friends or anything, but the lady that had died, she knew her. And then, obviously, Rylan had also died, and she knew him. And it's the first time that Tani had ever experienced loss. So that she does have a little bit of grief and pain over that. So then Poppy just decides that, like, this is a lack of sleep and stress making her gift feel weird. Like, obviously, she didn't actually feel anything other than pain. That's impossible. Yeah.
Poppy.
Exactly. But then Poppy starts thinking about the Dark One, because they were just talking about him. And she wonders, like, is he actually in the city, and is he actually after her? And Tawny asks her what she's going to do. And Poppy's confused. And she thinks that Tawny's asking her, like, what she's going to do about the Dark One. But Tawny meant Hawke instead. And there's just, like, 2 parts in this book, this section, where it's like, what if the Dark One is here? And then it's like, what is she going to do about the Dark One? And it's like, something is going on.
Yeah.
But Tawny was actually talking about Hawke. She's like, eventually you're going to have to talk in front of him, which is obvious.
But didn't she just talk in front of him? Like, wasn't he just in that room?
He's in
with
the room.
Girls?
Yeah, but they're apparently talking very quietly, Kristen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. In a quiet atrium, like, gardeny room with only 5 people in it. If you are talking quietly enough, you can't. Somebody who's 4 feet away cannot hear you.
No.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't realize ears worked that way.
They do.
I'm so sorry.
Good. His eyes are so focused, his ears aren't working. So Tawny asks Poppy what she's going to do. And that, like, makes Poppy look at Hawke. And their eyes meet. And I'm like, she's still wearing a veil. It's cute, sure. But she's also still wearing a veil. You know that they're looking at each other. Everyone does. But I'm also like, their eyes aren't meeting. She has a veil on. But again. And they're basically staring at each other. And she just thinks he has stunning golden eyes. Which is an interesting color and just made me think of our last book. But Hawke looks away towards the door, and Tawny comments that was intense. And Poppy feels it too, but she just kind of, like, brushes it off. Mm-hmm. And she says, like, Hawke's just doing his job. And Tawny says, yeah, keeping you alive. And from, like, right behind them, Hawke says, and breathing. Which is, like, startles them because they didn't hear him walk up. Hawke and Tawny, like, kind of joke together a bit about, like, how busy he is keeping Poppy alive and helping fainting ladies. And he asks about the nickname Poppy. And Tawny says that Poppy's brother came up with it, I guess. And her friends call her that. And Poppy, like, I guess she reaches out and feels his feelings again. And, like, I think we said it last week, but he constantly feels pain, like, emotional pain at all times. He just has it under check. Yeah. And he kind of covers it up with teasing and joking, and that's kind of what he's doing now. Tawny then asks him if he needs anything because he came over to them. Yeah. And he looks pointedly at Poppy. And, like, it kind of seemed like it was, like, one of those moments where 2 people are looking at the sunset, and then she's like, oh, it's beautiful. And he's looking at her, and he's like, it is. You know what I mean? Those moments. I know. It's one of those moments where she's like, Tawny's like, do you need anything? And he's like, just looking at Poppy, and you're like, of course. He needs her. He needs her. That's why he's here. But he eventually says that the Duke has summoned her, and he'll escort her there. And Poppy and Tawny both are, like, immediately worried, and it's noticeable. And obviously Poppy is wondering why she was summoned. And in her head, she's like, is it because of the red pearl? Is it because of, like, the interaction she had with Lord Mazine? Is it the look that she gave the Duke in his office? Or the guy that she stabbed after Rylan was killed? Or is it, like, because of what happened just that second with Lauren and Defina showing up and her not leaving? Like, there's so many reasons.
Any number of things, really.
Yes. Which, like, obviously it's not
not cool.
They're not great reasons for her to be in trouble, but also it could be anything, and some are way worse than others.
Yeah.
So they walk to the office, just Hawke and Poppy, and Hawke asks if she's all right because he says she and her maid seemed worried. And Poppy just blurts out that Tawny isn't her maid. And, like, this is the first thing that she said directly to him, and it's just, like, off the fly because she doesn't want him calling Tawny her maid. And I kind of appreciate it. She is, yeah.
She is.
She is, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. No, she is. But I just kind of appreciate it because, like, they're friends too.
I guess.
And I guess, yeah. So I think it's because Poppy doesn't want Hawke looking down on her. That's why she's, like, so defensive of it. Mm-hmm. But it's just, like, obviously she could not keep her mouth shut this whole time. But also it's just a funny time to be like, just throw out the words.
Yeah. I do appreciate that he sort of sees that she's, like, her and Tawny were both, like, stressed.
Yes. Oh, he's very observant. And, like, we get that a bit throughout this whole book.
Yeah.
I can't get into that, though. The section that I'm reading right now, I want to punch him in the face. Oh. So that's where I am.
Great.
Yes. Yeah. So he doesn't react to her voice. And she's obviously relieved by that, but she's also disappointed because she's like, it was her first kiss. Like, it's a big deal to her. And the fact that he didn't even know it was her is kind of upsetting.
Yeah.
And, like, I understand what she's getting at. But then he tells her he's seen her before. And she's like, oh, shit. But he's like, yeah, I've seen you watching me train from your balcony. Which I'm sure is also true. But then he gets, like, really close to her. And, like, they could almost kiss. They're so close to each other's faces. But she says he's mistaken and, like, moves away from him. And, like, they're very familiar with each other after such a short time knowing each other. Like, she doesn't joke with anybody this way. And she's like, I don't know, he's very informal with her, which is odd for her, I'd say.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the reason is because he's not from the castle, so maybe he hasn't, like, had a chance to sort of see how everyone is around her.
Smart.
Right? So, like, he's just treating her like maybe he would a lady in waiting, or, like, somebody like that he would be normally guarding, but because she's the maiden, she's held apart from everybody else in a different way. But he hasn't been really around enough to see that.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good point.
I've been known to make one every once in a blue moon. Very rarely.
At least once in an episode that makes me think very hard. So... So before she actually goes into the Duke's office, Hawke says that he'll wait for her outside. And that kind of makes her feel better because, like, she's very anxious about what is about to happen, obviously. But she goes inside, and the Duke and Lord Mazine are in the room. And the Duke says he's so incredibly disappointed in her. So she apologizes, even though she doesn't know why. But she says she isn't sure what she did, but he is never mad at her without cause. Which is, like, obviously a lie.
But that's, like, one of those, like, abused... Like, when you're being abused, and so much, like, when it's so much, you assume that it's your fault. Mm-hmm. Right? So this is the same thing, right? Like, she assumes she's at fault when, no, he's just an asshole.
Exactly, yeah. And then he continues, and he says he's been blindsided. So she automatically assumes, as anybody would, that Hawke told about the red pearl. So she's like, ah, shit, this is actually bad. Because, like, sneaking out of the castle without a guard is actually something that she could get in trouble for. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just, like, sitting in a room when people are talking around you. It's actually, like, she could be killed. She could be kidnapped. Like, it's not good. So then... the Duke tells her to take her veil off. and says that she grows more beautiful each time he sees her, like her mother. But then he obviously says, of course, it's such a shame because of her scars. And Poppy didn't actually realize that the Duke knew her mother, and she's very caught off guard. But the Duke says her mother was special.
Yee, creepazoid.
Yeah, and I'm like, is this another, like, unrequited love situation? Like, is this...
Do you know
like...
what, though? This is probably actually why he hates her. Because
yeah,
remember,
exactly, yeah.
Or Lord Mazine, like, maybe there's unrequited love all around. And, like, maybe they all love the mom, and she turned them all down for whoever the dad is, and now they hate her as a result.
Yeah, and that's kind of what, like... I only got that from this reading. But, like, I can't really think of anything else.
No. And maybe she looks like her mother.
Yeah, it sounds like she does look like her mother. And she looks like her mother, but she has her father's eyes, which I thought was very Harry Potter. But, obviously opposite. But... I was kind of wondering if that was it, especially since, like, her mother was supposed to ascend. And I think we get it next week that her mother was supposed to ascend, but then she met her... person, and he wasn't going to ascend, so she petitioned to not ascend. And she was allowed to. So I do kind of wonder if, like, there's this whole bunch of unrequited love somewhere.
Yeah.
That the Duke is now like, fuck you. To
Probably.
the daughter.
Yeah.
Which is like, is the Duke Snape? I think the Duke is Snape.
Same situation.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Well, except for if the Duke is Snape, then maybe Snape wasn't as bad as I thought he was. And I think he's the ultimate fuckboy. But at least he didn't do what the Duke does next.
Yeah. But
I guess.
Would that make Poppy Harry Potter?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Okay. Cool. Well, she's chosen, and she looks like her mother, but has her father's eyes, and she has a scar.
Oh my god.
Poppy is Harry Potter.
She's Harry Potter. We've uncovered it.
Yes. The Duke also brings up to Lord Mazine that her guard, Hawke, called her beautiful, and he does it to mock her and hurt her, and, like, she actually thinks in her head that it does hurt her feelings, and it's like one of the first times since she was young that him talking about her looks actually really gets to her. Because, like, I guess she's so used to it that normally she can, like, brush it off, but...
Water off a duck's back.
Exactly. But yeah, but this time it hurts more because...
It's Hawke.
Yeah, and, like, she believed Hawke, and then to just... For somebody to say, oh, I can't believe he said this, it's obviously not true. Obviously, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
But then he actually tells her the reason that she's there. He says that the priestess came by and said that last week she only stayed at her lessons for half an hour and wasn't engaged with her embroidery or the conversations that they were having. And then he also brings up, like, where she just was in the atrium and the two ladies showed up. And he brings up her smirk that when her veil came off in his office, and she smirked at him. And he also says that she's too close to her maid, and she doesn't correct him when he uses the word maid. But apparently the priestess said that she's too close to her maid, Tawny.
But, like, that was the point, ideally, was to give her a companion.
Yeah, so there's no winning.
No.
And apparently he's drinking, and in her head it reminds her of a time when he apparently drank Red Ruin and hit her so hard that she wasn't able to train for days.
Yikes.
Just, like, so awful.
He's got some rage.
He does have some rage. It's very bad. But he talks about her smirking at him, and he says the meeting to replace Ryan. And that's when she, like, finally snaps. And she's like, his name was Rylan. And obviously you don't want to snap to somebody that's about to beat the shit out of you.
Yeah.
But he tells her that 4 lashes should be enough. But she, like, snaps back again and says, like, is that enough or something like that? And he says, fine, 7 then. And she thinks in her head, like, she's had 10 before, so she knows she can handle it, but, like, 7 is still a lot.
Yeah.
Ugh. Very not great.
It's not a great scene. Like, it's hard to read.
Yes, it is. So she walks over to his desk, and she thinks to herself that, like, she could kill them both. Like, she has trained... She is really good, but the only reason that she doesn't is because she doesn't want the queen to be disappointed in her. And apparently the queen raised her after her parents died, so she knows the queen would not be okay with what is happening here. And, like, eventually she is going to finally tell her everything when she sees her, but she knows that she can't, like, write her a letter and say what's happening, because it would never actually get sent, because people read that stuff.
Yeah.
But, like, the queen literally is the one who held her when she was crying about her parents. Like, the queen was apparently very good to her.
Yeah.
So...
And we don't know how long yet she's been in Macedonia. Because if the queen raised her, then she would have been with the queen in the capital for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder... Makes me wonder if Victor was in the capital, or if she only got Victor as a guard when she moved.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll figure that out as we go along. Yeah, so she is at the desk, and then the Duke is basically like, you know what to do, and she pulls her bodice and undergarments to her waist so that she's basically naked from her waist up. And Lord Mazine is still sitting in the room, and he has an unobstructed view of her. And because he knew, obviously, where she was going to be.
Where she was going to have to brace herself.
Exactly. And her cheeks turn red and her eyes fill with tears. And she puts an arm over her chest to kind of, like, cover herself and protect herself from his gross gawking. The Duke touches her shoulder, and she's revolted, and it's not only because it's him touching her, but because she feels nothing with her gift. And, like, apparently all the Ascended are the same. Like, they don't
feel,
project any pain, which is weird, because, like, all humans project some pain, at least a tiny bit, like...
Yeah.
So, Ascendeds are weird like that. And then he starts hitting her with a cane across her lower back. And obviously there's going to be 7 of these. But she refuses to make a sound, and she bites her lip until it bleeds. And she kind of thinks to herself how horrible the Atlanteans must have been for people like the Duke and this Lord to have the gods' blessings to become ascended, when, like, the Atlanteans were forsaken by the gods because of how bad they were, basically. So, like, if these people are, like, have blessed, the gods' blessing, then how shitty
are the Ascended?
Are the people that...
Or are the Atlanteans. Are the bad guys.
Who have lost the gods' favor. So, like, how shitty do you have to be to lose the gods' favor if these 2 guys have the gods' favor? Yeah. Which is a good point.
Yeah. Valid.
Yeah. When she leaves the room, it's actually Victor outside, and she's happy about that because she doesn't want Hawke to know about all of this. Because I think we talked about it last week, she does feel some shame about this, which she shouldn't.
No.
But, like, you understand, like, you can understand why. Like, she doesn't want people to know that this is happening.
No. It wouldn't help or change anything, which I feel like we did say. Like, it wouldn't do anything. And all it would do would be cause people to look at her with pity, which, I mean, they can already barely look at her anyway. So can you imagine if it was all pity all the time?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's not great.
No.
So, she is happy, though, because she didn't want to have to try to hide it from Hawke. And she does think back to, like, while she was in there, she didn't make a sound, not even when Lord Mazine came over and moved her arm off her chest to put it back to her side so that he had a better view. Which is just so disgusting. So gross.
Can I just
He's
say
such a terrible person.
that next week, I think we get a little... It's not satisfying. Nothing about their futures are satisfying in next week.
No. Very annoying.
Yeah.
He's such a...
They're both
piece
creeps.
of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost feel like Lord Mazine is worse.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like, he's
Because
just there to watch.
But I feel like he's got like a sexual component to it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Which is even more gross. Yeah.
Which, and you'd think that the Duke might have that, because, like, I do think that there's something between the Duke and her mother. I don't know. Anyway, it's just so awful. Mm-hmm. She doesn't deserve this. So Victor obviously knows what happened because he's been around for her lessons with the Duke before. So he asks if she's okay. And she is basically like, it could have been worse. Like, it didn't break the skin. And she also lies to him and tells him that the Duke was alone because she knows he can't do anything. So, like, what's the point in letting him know, and, like, her shame being doubled because there's another person there. He asks her what she thinks the Duke would do if he found out about her training. If he did this for, like, basically no reason. The reasons were bullshit. Like, what would the Duke actually do if he found out something that was actually forbidden, like her training or her leaving? Yeah. And he just wants her to be able to be safe. Like, he obviously doesn't want this to happen, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. So his best defense for her not to go through these lessons is for her not to make any mistakes and for her not to break any rules. And, like, obviously the rules are so crazy that she's never going to stay within them. But, like, I do understand where he's coming from. Obviously he doesn't want her to be hurt. No. But it doesn't make sense to be like, okay, you can follow these crazy rules. But she's actually... Sorry.
I just feel like if she didn't break any rules, the Duke would find rules that he would make up rules that she had broken. Oh.
100%.
Like, you stared at me too long. You didn't stare at me long enough. Like, it would always be something, right? So, like, I feel like Victor's intentions are good, but, like, with someone sick and sadistic like that, there's nothing that you could do.
No, exactly. Because, like, one of the things that he mentioned this week was that she didn't talk with the priestess. And, like, she's not allowed to talk to people. Like, so how is she supposed to, like, join into this conversation when she's not supposed to?
But also, like, Victor is just victim blaming at this point. Yes. Like, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Like, bullshit.
Yeah. So yeah, he does bring up her training, but then she is actually more worried about what would happen to him if they found out about her training. But he doesn't care about that. He's like, he just wants her to be able to protect herself. Yeah. Which is fair. 2 days apparently pass, and Tawny spent the first night after Poppy's lesson helping her apply ointment every other hour. So she's, like, mostly healed by now. Like, this ointment is very good. And Poppy kind of thinks of the Duke mentioning her mother, and she wonders if that's why he hates her. And, like, that's kind of what we said, like, would make sense. She also thinks of Hawke and how he was her first kiss and how that means a lot to her, and he doesn't even know it was her. And she's apparently been avoiding him since her lesson. We also get a weird bit of information that apparently the capital has summer and spring, and Macedonia gets winter and fall, which is just kind of weird. Yeah. I don't really understand this world.
Yeah, me neither.
And I don't understand the point of that. Maybe it'll come up at some point, but out her window, though, she can see the weather is turning, and she knows it means the mist is coming. There are torches on the rise, and she keeps checking them, because I guess those are, like, the warning signs. And of course, they start to go out because of the mist. Mm-hmm. And the guards fire flaming arrows into a trench outside the rise, which I'm assuming is full of oil because it, like, lights up. And Poppy can see the mist and the twisted shapes of Craven inside of it. And a warning horn goes off. And Poppy knows she has roughly 3 minutes before everything in the castle will shut down. So she runs to her drawers to, like, prepare herself. And Tawny shows up and tries to stop her. But Poppy kind of has a good point here, because she's like, eventually the rise is going to fail. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, like, we can't just sit here and wait to die. So Tawny, like, lets her go and agrees to tell anyone who comes into her room that Poppy is sick with fright and locked herself in her bathing chambers, which is just kind of funny because it's the exact opposite. Tawny tells her to be safe because she doesn't want to have to serve the Duchess or be given to the gods, because apparently anyone given to the gods has to be celibate, so Tawny doesn't want to deal with that, which is fair.
Yeah.
Right? Poppy runs out of the castle and just makes it outside before everything shuts down. It's like one of those scenes where she has to do, like, the leaning back to, like, limbo under the door as it's shutting. Like, literally.
I love it.
Yeah. She sees an empty battle station. I guess they just don't have enough guards. So she runs to that one, and it already has bloodstone arrows. So she gets ready to fight from there. Mm-hmm. And more flaming arrows light the trenches, and she sees Victor fighting on the front line, like, down on the ground. Like, he's right there. And she wonders if Hawke is there too, or if he's still in front of her room, which is just kind of shitty because he's just guarding an empty room right now when he could be helping. Or maybe he's down there. I guess we'll find out in 4 seconds. She tries to keep her eyes on Victor, and she starts to fire her arrows, like, near him, just to keep him safe. And one stops a Craven from attacking him, and his head snaps in her direction, and she's sure he knows that, like, it's her that had...
Did it.
Yeah, had shot that arrow. Sorry.
Yeah.
My brain stopped working. She goes through 2 quivers and then notices, like, some Craven have passed the guards and started climbing the wall. She ends up killing one, but another makes it up to an archer to her right. And she watches another archer throw himself off the top of the rise to, like, hit a Craven and take him down to the ground. Like, this guy just, like, sacrificed himself to push a Craven down. Like, I don't even know if he even killed him. He just moved him down so he wouldn't get up and wreak havoc. Horses and riders come to help then, because I guess they're getting so close to the rise, which is good. And Poppy keeps firing, but someone sneaks up on her and calls her the goddess Bella or Layla, given mortal form. And she spins with her arrow ready, but it's Hawke. And she looks at him, and his armor, like, is dirty, so she knows he was in the front line too. And she checks if he's hurt with her power, but she notices that, like, the battle actually made him feel better than he normally does. It, like, took away some of his mental pain, because I guess he was so busy fighting that it, like, took away from his pain. But he doesn't have any physical pain, so he's not hurt. He tells her she is absolutely magnificent and beautiful, and she is shocked. And she knows she needs to get away because he can't know that it's her there.
Right.
And, like, that she's not in her room that he is also supposed to be guarding. I feel like they'd both get in trouble here. So obviously she decides that she can't talk to him because it'll give it away. So she climbs down the ladder, and he's about to say something, but he blocks her way and asks what she's doing there. And he grabs her arm, but instinct takes over, and she sweeps his leg and starts to run away. And he throws a dagger, and it catches her cloak against the wall, so she's, like, pinned there. And then she takes the dagger out of the wall and throws it at his face, and he catches it midair, which is impressive.
Yeah.
And then he runs along like the wall above her head and jumps in front of her. And she falls and lands hard, and like she can feel it in her back where she had just been whipped, caned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not great, but obviously he doesn't know that is happening.
Yeah.
But then she kicks out again, and he grabs her ankle and can see her bare leg, which is like, ooh,
a whole leg.
Right? And he can also see, like, the shitty slippers she's wearing. Like, she didn't put on shoes. She is wearing very shitty slippers to do this. And then he pulls her to him, like, pulls her up into him, into, like, basically a hug. And all she can think is he smells amazing. But then she gets her dagger to his throat before he can say much. And she pushes it until blood beads, and he laughs. And he calls her a stunning little murderous creature. And
what a nice compliment.
I know, I love it.
Yeah.
Big fan. He tells her dagger is a nice weapon. It's bloodstone and woven bone. And then he calls her princess. And like, I don't know if when you were reading it, but this part of the book, when he called her princess at this point, I was like, oh my god, he knows!
Yeah.
And like, the second time, not so much. But the first time, I was like...
Yeah. I don't remember if I was really shocked that he knew. The second run through, I was literally just about to ask you, like, how long you think he actually knew who she was.
Yeah.
But
I think he had to know after reading the book again and mostly finishing it. I'm not quite finished. I think he knew from the beginning, but if I didn't know the end of the book, I would think he knew up until she climbed down the ladder, and he was gonna say something but stopped himself, and he was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
That moment, I was like, oh, this must be when he figured it out.
Right.
And that could still be the case, I guess.
True. So, as soon as he calls her princess, she's like, oh shit, I totally forgot. When she was at the Red Pearl, he found the blade, like, tucked in her leg and, like, looked at it and examined it. And I guess it's unique enough that he could identify it was the same one.
Yeah, well, he said it's bloodstone, which is rare, but it's woven bone.
Yeah. Anyway, so he sort of, like, says after she's like, oh shit, like, I totally forgot, he recognized the blade. He's like, oh, we have so much to talk about. And she's like, no, we don't. And he sort of is like, oh my god, you're talking. Like, I'm amazed that you can speak, considering, like, you've been trying to avoid it this whole time that we've been around. And she's like, shit. Like, and they sort of, like, struggle and argue a little bit and, like, tease each other. And he's trying to be like, hey, remember what we did, like, in the Red Pearl? And she's like, no, I don't remember. Like, that never happened. Like, she's really trying to avoid, like, she's trying to be like, I didn't care about that. That meant nothing to me. And, like, trying to be, like, aloof and uncaring. And he's like, remember? But, like, in reality, it's one kiss. Like, and I get for her why it would be a big deal. I don't really understand why it's a big deal for him.
At this point, no.
So, like, he's sort of holding her by the wrists at this point and, like, wants to know why she's up there, but she doesn't want to tell him. And I'm like, isn't it sort of obvious?
Yeah.
Like, didn't he, like, witness any of the...
Yeah, he witnessed, like, a bunch of it.
So, like, I don't understand why. Anyway, so he sort of insinuates, which this bothers me, that because she's a woman, she obviously can't fight. And he's like, you shouldn't have this dagger unless you know how to use it. And she's like, I can use it.
She also just had it to his throat.
Yeah.
Obviously she can use it.
Yeah. And anyway, she's sort of like, you're being an ass for thinking that I'm incapable just because I'm a woman. So she tries to, like, knee him in the groin to get him to let her go. But he blocks it, and he says, "You're so violent, I think I like it." And it's probably one of my favorite scenes, like, lines in the book. But he gets, I feel like the line gets played out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, it's repeated quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess they're struggling, and it makes bodies rub, so she gets, she gets turned on, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And he admits to her that he actually did go back for her that night at the Red Pearl. Like, because he left and he said, "Wait for me, I'll be back." And he tells her, "I went back for you and you were gone." And she tells him, like, I couldn't stay. And he sort of, like, admits, like, "I know who you are." And then he calls her Penelope.
Ooh.
Yeah. And she asks when he found out. Like, when did he know it was her? And he said he knew as soon as she was unveiled in front of him. Which, like, good for him.
Yeah.
I'm happy that it didn't take a million years for him to get it.
Same. And, like, he also kept her secret. That's good.
Yeah. Anyway, so he also says that, like, he doesn't like calling her the maiden. Because, like, he's called her Penelope a couple of times now. He doesn't like calling her the maiden because she has a name. She's not just the maiden. She has a given name. So why can't he use that? She sort of then asks, like, if you know who I am and you know the whole Red Pearl situation, like, are you going to tell the Duke? And he says no. He admits that, not that he won't, but that he hasn't, because he's worried then that she wouldn't trust him. And if she doesn't trust him, that makes his job harder, right? To protect her, because she'll constantly be undermining him. But he says he is considering telling the Duke that she's sneaking out to fight Craven. And he's like, you are, like, being reckless. Like, this is you being reckless.
Which, like, he's not wrong.
No, not wrong. But anyway, so she starts to panic and freak out because she knows that if he finds this out, then she'll get punished. And she's about to tell him, like, no, you can't. You don't know what the Duke would do. But she sort of stops. So he's like, we're going to talk about this later. So he lets her go. And he's like, we're talking about it later. So she goes back to her room, and Tawny is there, and they talk about the attack a little bit. So Poppy tells her then that the Craven almost made it over the wall, but didn't. And, like, they talk a little bit more about the attack. Tawny doesn't want too many details. But then all of a sudden Hawke knocks on the door and wants to talk. And I'm like, later, like, this is, like, almost immediately. Yeah. He's like, we need to talk later. No, you need to talk now.
He should have just walked in with her. Yeah. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. Anyway, so, like, he tries to dismiss Tawny. And him and Poppy sort of get into it about authority. Because she's like, you don't have the authority to dismiss her. And he's like, oh, yes, I do. I'm your personal guard. I can dismiss anyone who, like, could be a threat to your safety. And she's like, they just have a little back and forth. Tawny agrees to leave. She's like, okay, I'll go. It's fine. Yeah. And the first thing that Hawke says when they're alone is that she has beautiful hair. You have beautiful hair. And I'm just like, wow, that's nice.
So sweet.
Yeah. It's just an odd compliment. Like, as soon as the door closes, what did you want to talk to me about? You have beautiful hair.
I'll take it, though. Yeah. If someone wants to tell me pretty.
Yeah, that's true. So he tells her that she's nothing like what he expected from the maiden. And she sort of then tells him why she ended up at his room in the Red Pearl. And she sort of explains that Victor was there and she didn't want him to catch her. And he already then brings up, like, what would the Duke do to you if he found out about the Red Pearl? Or about tonight? Like, what would he do? And he also says, why didn't you leave your room for 2 days after the last time Like, it was only a couple of days ago, really. Like, why didn't you leave your room for 2 days? But, like, she sort of gives him a non-answer. She's like, why do you care? Like, you don't know me. So, like, she doesn't really answer him.
Yeah.
And he sort of argues that he does, and that he knows her better than most. I mean, I don't really get that. I don't get why he feels that way, but, I mean, I guess you share one kiss and you think you know a person.
Yeah.
But he does say, like, he knows that she's compassionate because he noticed on her face when the Toolies were asking for that exemption for their baby, he could see from her face that she felt bad.
Which is very perceptive since he can only see half of her face.
Yeah. And then he also said at the Red Pearl, they had a moment where they spoke about death, and she was genuinely caring. Like, he could tell that wasn't fake.
Mm-hmm.
He also knows that she can fight, and she's super brave. And he admits that he feels like he's known her a lot longer than he has. He still wants to know what the Duke did, and he says he will find out, and she's like, not likely, and he's like, oh, trust me, I will. But he asks her then, like, why were you up there fighting? And she then tells him how her parents died. So we get a little snippet here about how they actually died. So apparently they were moving from the capital to the country, where they stopped at a small village that, like, hadn't seen a Craven attack in a decade. And that night, Craven attacked, and her father and mother were killed in the attack. And it's, like, it makes me sick. Like, so her brother Ian was, like, grabbed and brought into, like, a little safe room under the stairs or something. Mm-hmm. They were trying to get her to go there too. Her father went out in the streets to fight, leaving her mother and her and Ian in this inn. And anyway, so she was too afraid to leave her mother's side, so she ended up staying with her mother, and her mother got attacked and was killed, and that's how she got her scars.
Mm-hmm.
So the village couldn't defend themselves, so she said that she vowed that she would have a chance to fight if she had to.
Yeah.
So I guess they talk a little bit more about, like, the Craven attack on her parents, and how, like, you know, Craven attacks are still prevalent and blah, blah, blah. And she ends up, like, letting it slip that a lot more mortals come back cursed from the rise and from over the rise than people think. And that sort of reveals to him that she's involved in that whole dignity and death sort of brigade, I'm calling them, and, like, going to people's houses. So, like, she's, like, just accidentally admitting all of her secrets to him in these moments. And he sort of then admits to her, like, oh, I've heard rumors that the child of the gods is helping, and, like, helping with the dignity and death thing. And she's like, oh shit, like, if people are talking, then that means, like, more people can find out, and like, maybe, you know, like, revealing her secret, and especially where the fact that she uses her powers and all that jazz. Like, so she's, like, super stressed. But he's like, don't worry, like, the people that were telling me those things were telling me specifically because I'm also involved in that dignity with death thing.
Which is, like, a convenient thing to say. Who knows?
Yeah, right? But then he adds in that he says that those people don't deserve to be murdered in front of the whole town because they've already given everything. Essentially saying, like, these people are heroes, so, like, obviously they don't deserve the death that they're being given. And she, like, appreciates that he sort of has the same feelings as her. Anyway, so he goes to leave, and he tells her he won't report her, but next time wear better shoes. And I'm like, yes.
Always great. Good. Always good advice.
Yeah, I understand why she didn't get to put shoes on, but like, girl, if you're gonna run out, like, have a pair of shoes next to your bed or something, or like have a pair hidden in the servants' quarters that you could like change
Yeah.
into. Like, have have a bit of forethought.
Agreed.
Anyway, the next morning she is training with Victor, and he is concerned about Hawke's motivation. I guess she sort of tells him what happened, and he's concerned. He's like, why is Hawke keeping your secrets? Like, what does he want? What does he stand to gain? But like, Poppy's like, no, like, I felt honesty from him. I felt trust from him. Like, I trust him. So Victor's like, okay, fine, if you trust him.
Yeah. I think what happened was Hawke told Victor that Poppy was out. So that's why. And
yeah, he was not happy with Poppy for being on that rise. But like, she like shot arrows for Victor, so he sort of had a suspicion anyway.
But I think being caught by Hawke, like, now Hawke knows she was out, so he's worried that like Hawke could go to the Duke and be like, she was out.
Yes. Yeah. But that's why he's like concerned as to why he told Poppy he wasn't going to tell. He's like, why? Why is he being nice? Like, why is he keeping the secret? Yeah. And she's just like, I don't know. I trust him. Like, we had an honest conversation. I told him I was up there because of my family, and he was okay with it. So, anyway, they have like a little moment where Victor tells Poppy that like she's important to him, and like not just because she's the maiden, but because she's her, because of herself. And sort of says like she's like a daughter to him. And she sort of responds like, you know, you're special to me too. And as much as I appreciate it, and as much as I'm happy that she has people that care about her, does this feel a little disingenuous to you?
I don't know.
Because, like, as much as he does things to look out for her, I find that he's also, like, and I guess we'll get the argument, I think, next week.
Yeah.
But, like, I just find that, like, he doesn't protect her when it really matters. And I know that we've been saying that, like, he can't. And I appreciate that. He's in a tough position. But, like, he's literally witnessing her get abused and just lets it happen. And then on top of that, like, he's still, like, he calls her the maiden first. Like, yeah, he calls her Poppy when they're alone. But, like you said, when he took the vow, he called her the maiden. Like, his job is to her as a maiden first. And then on top of that, like, he's just completely fine with her situation and how she's living her life. Yeah. Like, he doesn't see a problem with it at all.
Yeah.
And, like, that's why this sort of doesn't feel like he cares about her as a daughter. Like, I don't think he does.
Yeah, if he cared about her as a daughter, he'd get her the fuck out of there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. It feels like a little... And I'll be honest, that's only on this read-through. First read-through, I was like, oh, yes, Victor.
There's nothing he can do.
But now on this like, next read-through, I'm like, it feels a little bit, like, icky to me.
Yeah, I get that.
Anyway, so that was my little sidebar. I don't know if it's later that day or, like, the next day. It must be later that day, but the Duke is giving a speech to the masses from, like, his little balcony out at the castle. And, like, the Duchess is there, and Poppy is there, and Tawny is standing next to her, and then, like, Hawke and Victor are protecting Poppy. So they're all, like, on this like, balcony. So the Duke is, like, giving this speech to the people about how, like, even though there was tragedy and even though there was loss, like, the gods didn't fail. And, like, the Rise didn't fail. So the Rise did its job and did protect people. And, like, he continues on. Poppy is, like I said, she's on the balcony with them and she's listening to the speech. Victor and Hawke are sort of, I'm calling it bickering-ish. because they're
I
not
like that word.
not bickering, not actually bickering, but like she says that like when one of them says something, the other has to like immediately contradict it or like immediately snap back at it. Like they can't agree on anything. But it's not like overtly antagonistic. Anyway, so we skip back. The Duchess is now speaking and says that no, the gods did not fail. Like, did not fail the people. But apparently the gods are unhappy because they think the people in this kingdom are losing faith. And she says that so many people are plotting with the Dark One and the dissenters are everywhere and that your neighbors could be in on the plot to kidnap the maiden. Like, that was a big thing. So, like, she's doing that thing where you're turning your neighbor against, like, turning people against one another so that they're looking at each other and not at you.
Yeah.
And, like, Poppy says that, like, she could see in the crowd that everybody looked at her first and then they started looking at each other to be like, ooh, my neighbor. And, like, all this is going to do is it's going to end up with, like, people are going to want to tattle.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is exactly what they want.
Yeah. So it's, like, almost like during the Salem witch trials when, like, everybody would be like, oh, my God, she looks suspicious. She's definitely a witch. So then they go and tell, oh, I think she's a witch. And then that person gets in trouble. Like, and then everybody was doing it. And, like, none of these people were witches. But, like, it reminds me of that. Like, they want everybody to turn on each other so that they can forget about what the actual issue is, which is that Craven's attacked the town.
Yeah, and they almost got over the rise. Like, that's the big issue.
Yeah. And I think you, like, just said, like, a few minutes ago that it wasn't just, like, when the Tulis, when their request got denied, you said something to the effect of, like, people were upset.
Yeah.
Like, people in the crowd. Like, it wasn't just, like, it was more people were upset.
Yeah, it wasn't just, like, the dissenters or, like, a percentage that could be dissenters. Like, normal people were upset. And you have to kind of wonder, like, we're in Poppy's head. Is she just noticing that because of her gift? Or is it noticeable to everybody? Or is it just noticeable to people that are very observant? Because, like, Hawke would probably notice, so.
Yeah, so, but yeah, so she's sort of like, so I guess the Duchess is like, you know, oh, it could be your neighbor. Your neighbor's, like, could be doing stuff. Like, everybody's losing faith in general. And, like, them being angry about the Tulis not getting an exemption, that's, I guess, considered losing faith.
Yeah. Which is, it's smart on their parts.
Very smart, yeah. The Duke sort of adds in on that, like, oh, yeah, your neighbors could be dissenters, but also, you know, if you're questioning the right, then that's bad. You shouldn't question the right. And so, like, he didn't say the Tulis, but, like, it was implied.
Yeah.
Like, the Tulis were the ones that came and asked for the exemption for their child. So, like, the fact that they asked for that exemption, that's them, like, questioning the gods, and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
He keeps, like, talking about the attacks and how, like, brutal they were. And I can only assume, like, the aim was to make people scared.
Yeah,
and
that's
suspicious.
What it seems like. Yeah.
And, like, Poppy's, like, felt all of their pain. And then she said that, like, she got caught off guard and started feeling this thing. And she said it felt similar to pain, but it wasn't. And she recognized it as terror. Like, people were really scared. And, like, she swept away with it and, like, sort of bombarded with it. And she's trying to, like, rebuild the wall in her mind to, like, block it out again.
Yeah.
But, like, she's like in a daze. She's that overwhelmed by it. And she's weirded out because she's like, this is a new feeling. Like, terror is not something I'm supposed to feel. Anyway, Hawke ends up making, like, some sarcastic comment about, like, what a you know, effective speech this is, or, like, I've never heard such a speech before. And that sort of, like, like, snaps her back into it and, like, cuts her off from the wave of emotions. Anyway, so she notices a few people in the crowd that aren't scared or in pain, but she's trying to identify the emotion, and, like, she sort of can't, because she sort of links it to Lauren earlier and how she felt excited about the Dark One. And so she was, like, trying to see if it was kind of like that, and then she was thinking maybe it was angry. And she sort of finally clues in, like, maybe my gift is evolving because I'm feeling new things that I haven't felt before. So the Duke and Duchess finish up their speech, and they sort of, like, rally the crowd. They sort of say, like, even though you guys haven't, like, all been really great, we've assured the gods that you are all worthy, and let's honor all those who died today by participating in the rite and honoring the gods. And everyone's like, yeah! Like, sort of gets everyone pumped for the rite. And Poppy notices that one of the people that she felt was like off, like either angry or excited, was moving closer to the stage. And it was actually, I think, the blonde one from the chamber, like from when the Tulis asked for the exemption. There was a guy standing there again. She had no idea what she was feeling from him. So it was actually the same guy. So he moves sort of close to the stage. And a few others start to move close to the stage too. And she sort of says, like, there's something weird going on there. And Hawke is like, yeah, no, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Like, I've noticed all of them because they're all sort of gradually moving closer to the stage.
It's like, I'm on this.
Yeah.
I've known this since we stepped out here. Like,
yeah. He's a genius.
Yeah.
So this guy, so, like, the Duke and Duchess are done. They're about to leave. And he yells at them that they're liars.
Gee.
And they don't protect you. And Poppy sort of, like, agrees with that. Because she's like, all of the Ascended. Because, like, when the Duke and Duchess are talking about, like, oh, the gods have protected you, we have protected you, the Rise protected you, blah, blah, blah. She's thinking, like, the Ascended are super strong, they're super fast, they're hard to kill, and yet all of them stayed in their rooms, stayed in the castle, stayed wherever, and didn't even try to defend the city. It was all the mortal people that could die very quickly and easily. They were all the ones that went out to save the city. So, like, she was a bit, like, again, like, her rose-colored glasses, I think, are slowly being taken off because she's realizing that these guys, the Ascended, kind of suck.
Seems like something's on the go.
So the guy is yelling at them, calling them liars, and they said, you don't protect us, but you do steal children in the name of false gods. And then he asks, where are the third and fourth boys and girls? In other words, where are the third and fourth kids at? Then he throws something onto the platform, which is, like, amazing. I'm shocked he had that good aim. And it's a Craven hand. And he yells, I know, where do you get a Craven hand? But he yells, from blood and ash we will rise, before he's caught and taken away. So this is where the title of the book comes from. It is the name of I guess it's like the call of the revolution.
Yeah, the dissenters' motto.
Yeah. So I guess they all go in. Poppy and Tawny are, like, really shocked by what happened because they are 100% sure that third and fourth boys and girls are serving in temples well into adulthood. And this man has really done nothing except for create, like, unnecessary fear and heartbreak amongst the good people. And she's sort of also insulted because that guy is, like, claiming that the children are being taken for nefarious purposes. And she's like, they're being taken for the grace of the gods. Like, you know, how could he assume that it's something bad, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, we're all like, "Ooh." Like, obviously, it has to be something somewhat nefarious.
Yeah, seems like.
Hawke sort of comes into this conversation and he says, "You're so sure that the children are being taken care of, but like they're never seen again." And Poppy's like, "Sure they are. Like the priests and priestesses see them and the ascended see them." And Hawke's like, "Yeah, but their families never see them again." And she's like, "Well, I guess." And he's like, if they were allowed to see their kids every once in a while, then these rumors would have no substance. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be able to claim these things. But the fact that you're not allowed to see your kid after you hand it over indicates there could be something sketchy happening.
Fair.
And Poppy sort of agrees. She's like, "Yeah, like I see that. I see what you mean. I sort of agree with that idea." But she's also said that, like, she doesn't think that that guy should have said anything unless he had evidence. Now, how does she know he doesn't have evidence?
Yeah.
But she thinks that that's mean because, according to her, it causes, like, unnecessary heartbreak amongst the families, unnecessary distress.
Well, and if it's not true, then you can obviously see why it would.
Mm-hmm.
So I get what she's saying, but it's also like, maybe let's ask some more questions. Let's make sure everything's kosher.
Mm-hmm. But she also agrees that, like, she can't see that these people, these children, seeing their families like once a month or once every few months, she can't see how that could hurt the gods' plan for them.
Mm-hmm.
So she thinks maybe it's an idea. Hawke sort of asks to speak to Poppy alone again, so they go to her room. But he doesn't even really like speak to her about anything.
Just
So
wants
like
to get her alone.
maybe. So like they go into the room and he says to her that like he hates speaking to her with her veil on. And he asks her if she likes it. And this sort of like she's taken aback because no one has ever asked that before. Like no one ever asked if she liked the veil. Which is another reason why Victor is sort of sus to me. Because like
Yeah, no, I get that.
how can he not care about her comfort?
Yeah.
Anyway, she sort of admits that she hates it and that it's suffocating. And he sort of is like, "Are you going to take it off?" And actually, they sort of talk about the rule. Apparently, she is supposed to stay veiled at all times. Even so, like, we've discussed that Victor and Hawke are technically allowed to see her unveiled, along with Tawny and the Duke and Duchess, right?
Yeah.
However, technically, she is supposed to be veiled at all times. Like, technically, she's not allowed to go around loosey-goosey, just showing all of these people her veilless face. So Hawke is sort of like, "I mean, we're in your room, you can take the veil off." And she was like, "Yeah, but like," she says she just feels a bit weird about it. And because technically it is against the rules. And he was like, "Yeah, but like, Tawny always sees you without a veil on in here." And she said, "Yes, because Tawny comes into her space. So like, she already doesn't have her veil on.
Mm-hmm.
But like, she doesn't really expect other people to come into her space besides Tawny." Which is just as sad as it is, the fact that she doesn't expect any other visitors except for Tawny.
Yeah.
And she just sort of insinuates that, like, it gives her a piece of control. Choosing whether, like, she chooses for Tawny to hang out with her without her veil on. So, like, it gives her an allowance of control there. And, like, so Hawke is sort of like, "I mean, you have the choice now. You can take your veil off." Like, and she sort of doesn't. though.
Yeah.
Which I think was an interesting choice, but I don't really know why I think it was an interesting choice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'm like, I think the fact that she kept it on means something, but I'm not 100% sure what it means at this point. Like, does she leave it on because she lacks control around Hawke? Does she leave it on because she doesn't want him telling her what to do? Is it more of a she feels vulnerable around him because of her feelings for him? Like, or is it all those things?
Might be everything. Might also be laziness. Maybe she doesn't have makeup on and she's not ready to show her face.
Oh, yeah. No, but she did say, like, after he left, she left it on for an extra long period of time until she was sure it was her choice to take it off.
Yeah.
So, like, I wonder.
It feels like a choice thing. Like, she gets to decide when she wants to take it off, when she wants to leave it on.
Anyway. So he does leave, but, like, what did he want to talk to her about in the first place?
I don't think it was anything.
Because we got nothing. Nothing.
Nope.
So the next morning, she finally goes to request an audience with the Duchess to ask her about her gift. The Duchess is sort of like intrigued, and she explains to the Duchesses she's been feeling things other than pain. So she's been feeling anger, terror, excitement. And the Duchess, like, the first thing she says when Poppy says, like, I've been feeling other things, the Duchess is like, you know you're not allowed to use your gift, right? Like, how are you feeling these things? You're not supposed to be using it. Like, you haven't been deemed worthy by the gods yet. So, like, I feel like she doesn't care about Poppy at all because her first thought was, oh, you've done something wrong. And then she sort of asked Poppy, like, can you use your gift on me? And Poppy's like, I mean, I can, but, like, I don't get anything from you. But she does, and she doesn't get anything from her. Mm-hmm. And that, like, I think there's, like, a bit of relief for the Duchess there. So, like, what is she thinking of that she doesn't want Poppy to know?
I just felt like it was, like, maybe her gift eventually will get far enough that she'll be able to feel something off of Ascendants. But I don't know.
Okay. The Duchess tells her that she just thinks her powers are maturing. And also says, like, make sure you don't tell the Duke about it. Yeah, because Poppy's really going to go running to the Duke and, like, something's wrong with my powers.
Yeah.
It's like asking to be abused.
Right?
Because he would abuse her for it, even though it's not her fault. Anyway, apparently this happened, the same thing, the whole power thing, happened to the First Maiden. And the Duchess said that it would remind the Duke about this First Maiden. So, like, Poppy can't go to him at all. And the Duchess is, originally, she's like, oh my god, do you know anything about the First Maiden? And she's like, no. Like, I think we said before that you're not allowed to know anything about the First Maiden.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, well, I think the gods would allow me to tell you this one little bit. She said that even though she's, like, not worth the air it takes to utter her name or whatever, she also said, like, she should have been found unworthy, but she wasn't. She was found worthy. But apparently her actions put her on a path to death. And essentially admitted that the Dark One killed her.
Which is a lot to admit.
Yeah. But, like, we don't get a name or anything like that. And
I assume we'll get more eventually in this book, but it seems like not a lot to go on.
No. And I don't know. Just to me, it feels like, it feels like, again, they're sort of placing blame. Because she said her actions put her on a path to her death. Her actions didn't, like, immediately cause her death.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. Should we really be putting fault on her at this point? I don't think so.
Yeah, but it was also, like, she shouldn't have been found worthy, but she was found worthy. If I were Poppy, I'd take that as, oh, well, I'll probably be found worthy because,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I'd take that as a bit of a, like, oh, maybe I'll be fine.
Anyway, so that's all we get about the first maiden. So later on, or the next day or something like that, Poppy is reading from a 1,000-page history book out loud in front of the priestess. I guess this is one of her lessons. So she pronounces this, this place in the book called the Skotos Mountains. And the priestess corrects her and says, it's pronounced Scotus. And she was like, you should know how to pronounce that correctly at this point. And Poppy's just thinking, like, she's literally read this book out loud dozens of times, and every single time, the priestess changes the pronunciation of the word.
Yeah.
In other words, she can never get it right. Hawke is in on this lesson, and it's so funny. He, like, pipes up, and he's like, oh, my family's from there, and they all pronounce it as Skotos, just the way the maiden did it the first time. Essentially telling the priestess that she's dumb.
Yeah.
And, like, they sort of, like, continue a little bit of back and forth, and then, like, the priestess is like, I don't remember asking your opinion. And he's like, sorry, I just didn't want the maiden to seem uneducated in her mispronunciation. Essentially, like, really, like, digging in there with the priestess. But all the same, she continues to read, and she reads a part about how the Ascended were given the gift of a god's blood, and that's what made them ascended. So she's reading this, and she shudders at the thought of drinking blood.
Yeah.
And she tries to keep reading, but the priestess stops her, and originally, Poppy doesn't even know why she stopped her. She's like, what? I didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then she asks, like, why did you just shudder? But, like, for Poppy, it was completely involuntary. Like, she didn't do it purposefully. She wasn't like, ew, blood. She was just reading, and it gave her chills. So she tries her best to cover and say that when the Ascended drink the blood of the gods, that reminds her of the Atlanteans drinking the blood of innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
Which pisses the priestess off to no end.
Yeah.
Even though both of us can agree that that is remarkably similar.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the priestess is real pissed. She says that they're not anywhere near the same thing because the Ascended took what was freely given, and I guess the Atlanteans took by force. Yeah. That makes it completely different.
Mm-hmm.
She also said, like, she's real worried if she has to explain that to Poppy at this point. She's like, shit, like, this is the type of stuff you're asking me about, and you're, like, thinking about and talking about. Like, you're the future of all ascended people. Like, it's all you. The future of our entire kingdom is on you. And she's like, so this is not okay. Like, you should not be asking this at this point.
Yeah.
But Poppy is sort of on a tangent because she's thinking to herself, like, you know, she's just thinking to herself, like, what would happen if I didn't ascend? Mm-hmm. And the priestess immediately goes to slap her. And Poppy's like, oh, well, wouldn't be the first time. And Hawke stops the priestess from slapping her, essentially, like, grabs her wrist and tells her to, like, back up. And the priestess originally is, like, sort of trying to be all, like, oh my god, like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Not in that voice, but that's how I imagine it. But he also, he sort of threatens the priestess and says, like, back up, or I'm gonna do a whole lot more than touch your arm. Like, you gotta be worried about a whole lot more than just me touching your arm. And I'm like, woo, go Hawke.
Yeah, 100%.
Poppy is, like, amazed that this is happening. because she said nobody has ever intervened before. Not Tawny, not Rylan when he was alive, and not Victor. Like, nobody has ever stopped that witch from hitting her.
Yeah.
Anyway, the priestess calls her unworthy and dismisses her. It's just like, you're not worth my time. I got too much other shit to do right now. They leave, and Poppy is like freaking out for Hawke. She's like, oh my god, like, you shouldn't have done that. Now you're gonna like lose your job, and you're gonna be ostracized and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And initially he's like, and she also sort of like, the hit, like the slap, it wouldn't have really hurt that much anyway because the lady's not that strong and she's sort of old, so like, you just shouldn't have done anything. You shouldn't have intervened at all.
Yeah.
And Hawke's sort of like a little bit surprised at at her sentiments, I guess. Like, he's like, he's a bit just surprised that she's just okay with being hit.
Yeah. Which is a reasonable reaction.
Yeah. But like, Hawke says like he doesn't care if it wouldn't have hurt. Essentially, he said like, if you honestly, because she sort of asks like, she sort of, well, not asks, she tells him that like he shouldn't have done that, it wouldn't have hurt, it's not a big deal. And he's like, and he sort of said to her like, of course it's a big deal, like of course it matters if you're like, it doesn't matter if you were hurt or not, of course it matters that you're getting hit. And he was like, and she was like, I can't believe that you would stop it. And he actually said like, if you don't think that I would do something about that and that I would step in, like, do you even know me?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially then he sort of says like, I refuse to stand by and watch people who are like marginalized and people who can't stand up for themselves. He's like, I'm not going to stand by and watch them do that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to stand by and watch people who have the power use their power just for the sake of using it. So then she sort of accidentally like implies, she's like, oh no, like you just made it worse, like she's gonna report us to the Duke and you don't know what the Duke's gonna do, blah blah blah. And just through the jigs and wheels, like, she accidentally implies that the Duke also hits her in like a convoluted way, like without saying it, but makes him sort of be like, because at first he's like, we should go to the Duke about this, like I can't imagine he's okay with you being hit. And I'm sort of like, oh Hawke, you really have not been here long. Like, I don't understand how he doesn't put two and two together.
Yeah, doesn't really make sense.
Anyway, once like she lets that out accidentally, and he's like, what? Like, is he hitting you? She's like, oh no, sorry, that doesn't happen. Like, he just give me a lecture. And
just a lesson.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, I must have misinterpreted. And she's like, yes, you did. But like, still. Anyway, they chat a little bit, and he asks her if she could escape being the maiden. Would she? And she's sort of like, what? No, I would never. Like, it is an honor to be the maiden, and like, I could never abandon it, and blah, blah, blah.
You can't ask that of...
Yeah, you can't ask that of me. And he sort of tells her, he's like, your life sucks. He doesn't say that verbatim, but that's what I think of.
Yeah, it's true, though.
He was like, he essentially says, you're not allowed to show your face to anyone. You're not allowed to travel outside the castle. You're not allowed to speak to, like, anybody, almost, or be spoken to. You're essentially kept in your room most of the time. And, like, he says that, like, she's forced to live in sort of, like, bare conditions. Like, her room is not, like, luxurious and well appointed. It's actually quite, like, threadbare. And he also said that, like, when the priestess moved to hit her, she didn't flinch or like move away. That indicated to Hawke that like it's happened before.
Yeah.
So he's like, So, like, on top of all this, you're getting abused. And, like, he said, things that are normal for people are, like, it's really these gifts, these treats that are impossible for you to attain. Like, he essentially said that, like, what normal people do, if she wants to do something, she has to, like, behave immaculately. And I don't really understand that at this point because we haven't seen an example of that.
Yeah.
So, I don't really know why it's included in this list, but still. So, like, he sort of sees her life for what it is and not what it is supposed to be. And Poppy asks him, like, if I did try and escape, like, would you try and stop me? And he doesn't answer right away. Instead, he comes back with, would Victor? And she says, like, she knows that Victor loves her and knows that, like, he thinks of her as a daughter and whatever, but he would definitely try and stop her from running away.
Yeah.
And Hawke then admits, like, that he would just be too curious to find out how she would escape to even try and stop her. So, it sort of throws another, it's one of those other things where I'm sort of like, oh, Victor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do.
So they talk about the rite for a little bit, like it's in a couple of days. We know that it's going to be Poppy's first one. Apparently, the after party of the rite gets real crazy and sexy.
Yeah, seems like.
And I guess Hawke sort of teases Poppy about it a little bit and sort of mentions the red pearl, and she has to be like, you have to stop bringing that up. You're not allowed to talk about it. They're like walking through the castle now, and he asks, like, does she want to go to bed? Does she want to go to her room? And she's like, well, not really. So they walk past the courtyard and sort of stop. They don't go in, but they stop there. And she sort of tells him that she has avoided it. Like, it used to be her favorite place, but ever since Rylan died, she has avoided it like a plague.
Mm-hmm.
So they talk a bit more, and I guess she tries to change the subject, and they end up getting on the subject of Hawke having a brother. And it's weird word choice, because he says that he had a brother, past tense. However, she feels for his pain, and like you said, it's always there. So she uses her power on him to sort of make him feel a bit better and take her pain. And he's sort of like, oh my god, I feel so weird. And she's like, oh, because obviously he can't know about the power. So she has to play stupid. And then she's even like, shall we go to the nurse? He's like, no. Anyway, so they're just chatting a little bit. And then he sort of says where he's like, my brother's not dead, so I don't need the sympathy. She's sort of, like, really intrigued about this. She's like, what the hell? Like, why is he so sad about his brother if his brother's not dead?
Yeah.
He asks her then, like, do you want to go into the courtyard? And she's like, no. So she just goes back to her room. That night, she can't sleep, obviously, or that evening or whatever. She really wants to read that diary that Lauren spoke of. And she sort of says, like, she's not allowed to have those books. Really, she's only allowed to have historical tomes, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes Tawny will sneak her in something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so of course she was hearing about the two girls talk about, like, a sexy book. So she has to have it.
I'd want it too.
I also want it. And we do get snippets of it here and there, which are glorious.
I know, but I want the whole thing. I hope that eventually she writes it.
Maybe. Anyway, so she sort of sneaks out and she goes across the square to the Athenaeum, aka the big library is what I'm calling it. Oh my gosh, words. Hawke was on guard outside of her door, and then she used the servants' passages to get to where she needed to go. So he obviously didn't know she was gone. So she got in to the Athenaeum with no problem, found the book. But instead of going right back home, which she said she couldn't do, she found an empty, like, reading room with, like, a fireplace and, like, there's, like, liquor and expensive metal, like, clear glass jugs, and it's a very fancy location. Anyway, essentially, the book, because she sat down, she started to read, and the book was essentially what I'm calling porn on paper.
Yeah.
Like, it was scandala.
Yeah.
So she got real, like, scandalized, and she was, like, red in the face. When all of a sudden she hears a voice coming from outside the room. Oh my god, it's the Duke. Turns out the room belonged to him.
What are the chances?
I know.
Apparently 100%.
100%. So she has to, like, climb out onto a window ledge and just stay there until he's ready to go out. And I just think that is hilarious.
Agreed.
Anyway, so he had a meeting with someone that we don't know about, like, the man, I'm going to call it, or the dude. In other words, the blondie who spoke up at the speech. Obviously, they tortured him to get him to talk, because why wouldn't you?
That's how she goes.
Yeah. The other guy said that he confirmed that the dude was not an Atlantean, and the Duke said shame, which is something that Poppy found weird.
Which, I don't know, I don't really know why she finds it weird, because, like, if that guy was an Atlantean, then that's who killed the chick, so good to find them.
Yes, but I guess, I don't know.
His intention is not that.
I suppose.
Yeah, but how is she supposed to know? Anyway, yeah.
They essentially implied that they were torturing him to talk. And apparently they used his mother, which sounds a lot worse. Anyway, so apparently the guy said that he didn't know anything about Atlanteans, and he doesn't think that Prince Castile, the Dark One, is in the city at this moment. And he also said that he knew the truth about the third and fourth kids, and soon so would everyone else. So I'm wondering, like, what evidence does he have? Because this is indicating he has some sort of evidence.
Yeah. Like, to say he knows the truth about them, and for Poppy to hear that.
Well, Poppy doesn't hear it from this guy. Hears it from the guard that was torturing him.
Yes, yeah. He's saying he says he knows the truth. I wonder if the guard knows the truth?
I don't know.
I don't either.
The Duke...
Interesting.
Yeah. The Duke asks if he's still alive, and the guy's like, oh yeah, he is. And so he's like, well, I'm gonna go see him for myself. And the other guy's like, oh, should we prepare for a trial? And the Duke's like, nope, there won't be a need.
Good.
Yeah. So essentially he's going to murder the guy.
Yeah.
And Poppy is actually, it doesn't sit right with her. Some dude being killed, like, in a dungeon with no trial, no chances, nothing. Like, he's just murdered. So she's like, it doesn't really sit. It doesn't sit great.
Yeah.
So they go ahead and leave. And she's like, oh my god, thank god.
Yeah, because she's on a fucking window ledge.
So they leave, and she's about to climb in the window. And she hears Hawke's voice asking if she's still out there. Which is just a, ah ha 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 ha.
It really is.
And he hauls her in, and she can tell that he's, like, really pissed. Because she managed to escape him.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, he doesn't let go of her, even though she's like, dude, let me go. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And she's trying to, like, shimmy away, but it just, like, rubs their bodies against each other, and both of them, like, start to get turned on. Which is funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this, like, creates a moment where he, like, runs his hand down her face and leans down like he's gonna kiss her. And she's like, oh, yes, kiss me. Like, she really wants him to kiss her. And she said that, like, if he does it again, it'd be, like, really meaningful. Because, yes, he was her first kiss, but he didn't know it was her.
Yeah.
So, if he kisses her again, like, this time, he knows who she is. And it's him choosing to kiss her because of who she is.
Yeah.
So, like, it's really meaningful. And that's literally where this chapter ends, is her being like, yes, kiss me, do it.
Right now, please.
Right now, in the Athenaeum, in the Duke's secret. Not secret, but in his private room.
Yeah, when she was just outside for, I'm guessing, at least a half an hour.
At, bare minimum.
Yeah, on a ledge.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very high up in the air.
Yep.
How did nobody see her from outside?
It said that she was on the side that was didn't back onto the street.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, so that's literally where we end. Like, I'm going to say mid-moment.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite a kiss.
Yeah. Next week's is way worse.
What do you mean? Like,
I just did the notes for it, and the cliffhanger that we end on next week is...
way worse?
Guys, prepare yourself.
Great. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that wraps it up for this week. So, if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at coffeeandcoread.
So next week, we're going to be discussing, obviously from Blood and Ash, chapters 22 to 32. So make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find our content. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see you on the next page.